I have decided to follow Jesus. So goes the old hymn. But the question is that really enough? To be a disciple of Jesus, is it enough merely to walk in his footsteps? Or do we have to be more dogged in our pursuit of him, more intentional in our chasing after him? That's the question we're going to answer in this video. Stay tuned. Hello, I'm David Lang, and this is Bible to Life, where we bring the Bible to life so that it can better impact your life. I recently did a video in which I called for people to stop the abuse of the original Greek and Hebrew of the Bible. There are all kinds of wonderful insights to be gained from studying the original languages of Scripture. But there's also a lot of nonsense that goes on by people who know a little bit of Greek and Hebrew, but they really don't understand how languages work very well. And I gave you some tips for how you can tell when somebody is abusing the Greek or the Hebrew. And I'll link to that video up here. In this video, I want to look at a meme that I recently saw on social media that makes a claim about the Hebrew word Jesus would have used when he called his disciples to follow him. It essentially says that Hebrew word means not just follow, but pursue. And so if we're going to be a disciple of Christ, we have to be actively pursuing Jesus in some particularly intentional way. It's an interesting claim. So we're going to take a look at the meme, and then we're going to examine the scripture and examine the original languages and see if the claim actually holds up. Okay, so let's take a look at this meme and the claim that it makes. First, it gives us a Hebrew word, radaf, and tells us how to pronounce it. And then it explains when Jesus called the disciples to follow him, he understood that the Hebrew word for follow is radaf, which doesn't just mean passively follow someone around, but to pursue them. Radaf means to chase down and to be hot on the heels of someone. That's what Jesus calls us to do, to be hot on his heels. And then it gives us John 8:12 as the text from which this is apparently drawn. So let's take a look at John 8:12. I'm looking at it in a Bible program called Accordance Bible Software. And this program lets me look at the original text and do all kinds of interesting searches so that we can explore this rather interesting claim. So John 8:12 reads, "Again Jesus spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." And you can see I've got the Greek New Testament in parallel with the English, and so I can hover over the word follows and see the corresponding Greek word. And I can even click and hold to get a little bit of help. So this word follows comes from the Greek word, it translates the Greek word akolutheo. Now, already we see a problem because this is a Greek word, not a Hebrew word. The Gospel of John was originally written in Greek. Now, Jesus may originally have spoken in Hebrew, but if he did, we don't know what Hebrew word he used. All we have is the Greek New Testament that gives us the Greek word akolutheo for follow. Now, if we double click this word here, we can look it up in a lexicon and we can see, all right, so the Greek word akolutheo means simply to move behind someone in the same direction, come after, to follow or accompany someone, to follow someone as a disciple, to comply with. So by extension, I'm following Jesus like I've decided to follow Jesus and obey him and do what he calls me to do, and simply to come after in sequence. So this Greek word, akolutheo, simply means to follow, to come after. There's no indication that it means to pursue. But perhaps the Hebrew word that, perhaps the only Hebrew word that this Greek word could be translating is the Hebrew word radaf, which means to pursue. It's a possibility. But how do we know that? At this point, we're only speculating. But there are a couple of ways that we can test the theory. Does akalutheo, would it have most naturally translated radaf? So one way we can test this, and it's not a very reliable way, is to put a modern Hebrew translation of the New Testament in parallel and to see, well, what would modern translators of the Greek New Testament who were translating into modern Hebrew, what word would they have used to translate akalutheo? And we can see here they used the Hebrew word halach, and then actually a Hebrew phrase, halach acharei, which means to walk after. So they chose Hebrew words that simply indicate following in a sequence, not pursuing. It's definitely not the Hebrew word radaf that we see here. So that's interesting. Apparently, akalutheo certainly doesn't demand that it's a Greek translation of the Hebrew radaf. But again, this is not a reliable way of testing this theory. It just shows us what a modern translator would do to translate this into modern Hebrew. But maybe ancient Hebrew would have used radaf there. Who knows? So there's another way, a little more reliable, that we can test this theory. And that's to go back to an ancient Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible and see if we can see a correspondence between the Hebrew word radaf and the Greek word akalutheo. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to use a special command where I can search the Greek Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, for words that correspond to a word in the Hebrew Bible. So I'm going to type in the Hebrew word radaf and click OK. And so now it's going to search the Greek Septuagint for any Greek word that translates the Hebrew word radaf. And let's see what we get. All right, so we get kata dioko, we get dioko, a couple of different words here, and we could go through all 256 hits to see are any of these akalutheo, the Greek word that's found in John 8:12. But we don't have to do that. I'm just going to go to the analytics here, and I'm going to choose analysis. And I'm going to count down so that this list will list all the words that were found by this search, all the Greek words that translate the Hebrew word radaf. And it's counting down, so which Greek words most frequently translate radaf? Well, we get kata dioko, which is the first word that we found, and then dioko, the second word that we found. Those account for 71 and 52 occurrences. So then the rest of these, there are some additional words, and some of these words are words that are part of a Greek phrase that was being used to translate the Hebrew word radaf. But if we go, well, let's go back alphabetically, and let's see if akalutheo appears. Here we get antikemai. That's already beyond akalutheo in the alphabet. So akalutheo is not anywhere to be found. So when ancient Hebrews were translating Hebrew into ancient Greek, not once did they choose to translate radaf as akalutheo. So I think it's a pretty good indication that this meme is completely bogus. There's nothing to indicate that when Jesus speaks of, when he calls his disciples to follow me, or when he says, whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life, he's not saying anything about about pursuit, about being hot on his heels. He just means walk after me, walk in my footsteps, do as I do, and go the direction that I'm leading. So going back to the meme, where would they even have gotten that from? This idea that, well, Jesus must have been using the Hebrew word radaf here. I think I know where it comes from, and this is just a guess. But I suspect that the person that put this idea forward was familiar with Psalm 23:6, where it says, "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Well, it's rather well known that the Hebrew word in Psalm 23:6 that is translated follow in the King James and in the ESV literally means to pursue. It is the Hebrew word radaf. That's what this is. There's radaf right there. So I suspect that the person who put this meme forward was familiar with this and went, oh, okay, well, follow in English means radaf in Hebrew. But Hebrew has a number of different words for pursuit and a number of different words for follow. And English, that may not be the best translation of radaf. In fact, some translations actually translate it as, "Surely goodness and mercy will pursue me all the days of my life." That's a good picture of God's love for us, in that God, like a good shepherd, persistently pursues his wandering sheep and does for them good and offers them mercy, no matter how much they stray. That's a very different context than John 8:12, where Jesus says, "Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness." So in Psalm 23, it's God's love and mercy that pursue us. But in John 8:12, there's nothing to indicate that we are supposed to pursue Jesus. All right, so I think that we can say with some certainty that this particular meme, this particular claim about what Jesus meant when he said, "Follow me," is pretty well busted. It's not the case that this word that he used meant to pursue. It simply means to follow, to walk in my steps. And that was the typical way that rabbis called disciples. Come, follow after me, walk in my steps, learn from me, model your life after mine. That's what Jesus calls us to do. And this idea that, obviously there's nothing wrong with pursuing Jesus. There are times in our sanctification when we're really active and we're really intent and we're really studying the Bible and we're really trying to pursue him and purify our lives and be like Jesus. And frankly, there are other times when we're more half-hearted. There are times when we're prone to wander. And yet, that doesn't mean that we cease to be his disciples. In fact, it's at exactly those times that God's goodness and mercy pursue us, even as we, like sheep, are going astray. So I think this idea that while it's fine to say, hey, look, we should be pursuing Jesus, to say that that's what discipleship is, that it's somehow more active and requires, complete commitment on our part. We have to be hot on Jesus' heels to be disciples of Christ. No, we're disciples of Christ even when we're struggling and even when we're wandering, because at those times the grace of God is pursuing us. And so he doesn't let us go even when we're not hot on his heels. If you enjoyed this video, please click like and subscribe to this channel, and we'll see you next time.